right, Mike Florio makes his This Is Football debut. You know him from Pro Football Talk. He does a show with our buddy Sims. He's also a novelist of 3 books, Father of Mine, Son of Mine, and On Our Way Home. I want to talk about that a little bit later. What's going on, buddy?
How are you? You know, I've been waiting patiently for the invitation. Patiently. You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
We had you at the Super Bowl last year. I made a little snarky comment about Sims has been on, but I haven't been on. And you said it's coming soon.
It's coming soon.
I guess it all comes down to how you define soon.
Soon is 14 months for me. Within 14 months. I've long said that. Not only that, I would say McCourty's been on. Garrett's been on. Patrick Doherty, who I love, has been on. Basically, every single NBC employee has been on except for you. I apologize for that.
No, I know where I rate. I always like to know where I rate. I know.
Tarico's been on. Who have I not gotten on? I haven't gotten on. No, the soccer guys haven't been on yet. The NBC soccer guys. We'll work on that. But no, that's it. So I'm glad you're here. I apologize for the 14-month delay, and I'm fired up.
If I was really upset about it, I wouldn't say a word about it. I just think it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we'll start here. So Shedeur Sanders. So we have Kaylin Kaler on the show as well, and she did some great reporting on how teams are increasingly trying to figure out a prospect like Shedeur who doesn't have a traditional quarterback's mindset. We do a lot of this discussion in the other segment, but it's basically he doesn't think like a quarterback. He thinks like a defensive back. And so he doesn't watch film of quarterbacks. He's open about this. It's just a different deal. He's extremely open about this with me. You know, I think he did a lot of stuff on Radio Row about his mindset. Now teams are, he's brash and arrogant. For me, you want to take the brash guys off your big board at quarterback. It's going to be a very, very small big board. It's no longer going to be a big board. It's going to be a small board. And I think teams have to reckon with that. In your mind, in league circles, is Shedeur actually falling, or is this a media fall?
Well, nobody ever rises or falls, typically. What happens is the media catches up to what the evaluators have been thinking all along. So the media collectively puts a guy top 5, and then as the draft approaches and the media starts to hear what the people actually think, he's falling. No, you were just wrong. And now you're learning what the people who actually have their jobs riding on these picks believe about the prospect.
Yeah.
My one big thing here, and you could nitpick, and you're right. If arrogant and brash disqualifies a quarterback, there aren't going to be many quarterbacks in the NFL. And don't you want the guy who is your on-field leader, who needs to instill confidence in every other player on the field, don't you want him to be arrogant and brash versus quiet and shy? You want a guy who's going to take charge. You need that guy who's essentially the coach on the field. So to me, that was an indication. And this is, I'm trying to figure out whether this was an accident from Deion Sanders or whether he's playing 4D chess. Because when we had Deion at the Super Bowl, I asked him point blank, will you ever coach in the NFL? Because he's given different answers to that question since Colorado became a thing and people started wistfully thinking about Deion Sanders as an NFL coach. Because I told him, I want it to happen. It's good for our business if Deion Sanders is coaching in the NFL. He's dynamic, he's interesting, he's intriguing, he talks, and I think he could be good because he'd be the CEO of the program. You hire the assistants to take care of the X's and O's. I think Deion could do it. When we asked him at the Super Bowl, he said he would only ever do it if he was coaching his son. Now, what impact, Kevin, does that have on a coach who is going to sign off on the drafting of Shedeur Sanders? Unless you are secure in your position, unless you are oblivious to outside noise, and you know what's going to happen, Shedeur's going to have a 3-interception game, and they're going to ask Deion about it. And is Deion going to say, my son just needs to get better? Or is Deion going to say the receivers aren't good enough? Or is he going to say the coaching isn't good enough? You have to be a coach who doesn't care about any of that. And this is where it becomes 4D chess. If Deion meant to do this, this is the way to engineer landing with a better team. In lieu of doing the Eli Manning and John Elway, I'm not playing for you. Shedeur can say, and he said it last week at the Combine, I'll play for anybody. I'll turn a bad team around. I can do it. And I'm thinking, okay, there's naivete in that because certain quarterbacks, no matter how good they are, they're not going to turn a bad team around. Bad teams stay bad. But this could be the way to ensure that one of these teams with a history of derailing the careers of young quarterbacks will end up passing on Shedeur Sanders because the coach will look at this and say, wait a minute, we take Shedeur, I'm getting fired after 1 year, and Deion's going to be the head coach. Yep. So this could help him get to a better spot. And yeah, he might fall some, but he may end up in a better spot.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about it that way. If you're Brian Daboll, and you got to win 10 games to save your job. Joe Shane is the least popular person in the tri-state area because of what he did with Saquon Barkley. And all of a sudden, Deion Sanders becomes the leading candidate the moment you draft this quarterback. The reason you take quarterbacks a lot of the times is to reset the timeline of your own contract status. Oh, you can't fire us now. You go, no. We have a rookie quarterback. You're doing the opposite of it. So I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a good point. The other thing is, for me, the more I think about it, there was a TV question I got a couple months ago. Remember, Deion was saying all sorts of things about maybe there's certain teams he wants Shedeur to play for, et cetera, et cetera. You alluded to that. If Teddy Clark ends up being my 2-year-old, ends up having a cannon arm and somehow is taller than 5'11", I don't see that in the cards, but Lord, maybe by then it'll be a different game. And he's not gonna be fast. I'm not sure how it happens. He's a great quarterback. But let's say he gets there. And the Browns have the number 1 overall pick, and they're still the Browns. I'm doing everything I can to keep him out of there because geography is destiny for quarterbacks. Everything I can. We have a proof of concept that there are some places that quarterbacks' careers go to die. And I completely understand if Deion is playing 4D, 5D, 6D chess just to figure out, hey, I want a little more control over this process. I think if he is doing that, that to me is weirdly admirable. Maybe I'm crazy.
Well, he either made a mistake that could cause Shedeur to slide, or it's genius because look, the teams at the top of the draft got there because they're bad. Unless someone trades up, you're there in the top 5 because you're bad. And the same teams keep gurgling up into the top 10 because bad teams stay bad. It all comes from ownership. This is a much longer discussion that your audience may not be interested in, but the dysfunction starts with ownership.
Always.
And it lingers through GMs and coaches and decisions and quarterbacks, and it hurts players. Look at all the former Jets quarterbacks that have gone elsewhere, all of them. Geno Smith and Sam Darnold, but who knows? Maybe Zach Wilson is going to land somewhere in a quarterback-friendly system, and all of a sudden we're like, holy crap, we didn't know Zach Wilson could play. So I think bad teams have a lot to do with young quarterbacks getting off to bad starts, and sometimes you never get a second chance.
I completely agree. Speaking of third chances, Aaron Rodgers is about to be a free agent again. What is his market actually? Like, I feel like he should have just gone back to the Jets, but I understand, okay, they want a fresh start. Aaron Glenn doesn't want anybody bigger than him. I think he'd be the best football option for them. He wasn't that bad last year, but then he gets cut loose. I keep saying the Steelers would be a good option. People say, no, they would never go for that. My feeling is like, no one, if the problem is Aaron Glenn doesn't want anybody bigger than him in the building, and he hasn't said that, but if that's the thought process that Aaron Rodgers just is a different type of deal than what they're doing in that facility this year. No one's bigger than Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. No one. And so if you just say, hey, Aaron, you're just going to be playing football, it's a little bit like Green Bay in the sense you get Latrobe training camp. Everybody knows everybody. I mean, you sure you've been around. It's only a few hours from your house. That organization is, even though it's in a big city, is a small town organization. Everybody knows everybody. That could be good for him. And also from a football standpoint, they're ready to win now. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have that much gas in the tank. I'll just put it on you. What is his market?
Well, when it first became obvious that he wanted to leave the Jets, and it became obvious to me because I'd read between the lines when he's on Pat McAfee's show or when he's doing his midweek press conferences, I thought Aaron Rodgers wanted to leave the Jets, and he wanted it to look like the Jets were the ones who ended it. Now, It's possible that as it got closer to the end, he might have sensed there isn't some great alternative out there for me, so maybe I've changed my mind and maybe I'd like to stay. That's possible. And this gets to my point. When the word hit our radar screen last week, and I think it was the most intriguing nugget other than the Thrilla and Vanilla Latte that happened at the
Yeah.
JW Marriott Starbucks, I had heard, and I trusted it when I heard it based on who it came from, Rodgers' agent reached out to the Giants. And if Rodgers is calling the Giants, who do not fit his two factors, one, the team's got to want me, and two, the team's got to be good. No one would say the Giants right now are objectively a good team. When that's initiated by Rodgers, that suggests he doesn't have a lot, and that the good teams out there aren't calling him. And I thought from the get-go, the Steelers made the most sense. The Steelers would make a ton of sense. He'd be better right away than anything they've had since before Ben Roethlisberger began to decisively lose the race with Father Time. And it's been several years since they've truly had a high-end quarterback, and they swung and missed with Kenny Pickett. Last year was okay, not great. Rodgers would come in and make them better offensively. He would make the team better. By all appearances, they're not interested. Does it have anything to do with last year's experience with Russell Wilson? It might. But the Steelers have shown no interest in Aaron Rodgers, which I think was one of the reasons why he showed interest in the Giants. So I think that the Giants make sense. To get back to what you were saying earlier with Shane and Daboll, I don't think they can afford to make the argument to John Mara, let's trade up and get Cam Ward and ride it out for 5 years. Because when John Mara says he's keeping these guys, he said the next day, I'm just about run out of patience.
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
So I think they have to win now at the expense potentially of the long-term interest of the franchise. And that becomes a problem because if you're focused exclusively on making the playoffs now, you're not building a long-term contender. But it's not in the interest of the coach and GM to try to build a long-term contender, because if it's going to pop in 26, but it doesn't in 25, you're going to be gone by the time the plant grows its fruit. So again, dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. And even though the Giants have won a couple of Super Bowls this century, they are still dysfunctional. Starting with ownership. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And this weird balance they have to strike. Do we play for the present? Do we play for the future? If they tilt toward let's go for it now, then Aaron Rodgers makes the most sense for them.
I don't know. The Giants should take control of the process and trade it for Cam Ward. But as you said, like Daboll, if they go 5-12 this year, Daboll gets fired and somebody else gets a chance. It becomes one of the best openings if Cam Ward shows any promise going forward. Everybody's going to want that job. So I don't know. You know what they should have done? Fired them 2 months ago. Like that would have been the easiest solution.
No half measures.
No.
As Mike Ehrmantraut taught us years ago in Breaking Bad. And you can't and so John Mara doesn't want to come off as a guy, although it's too late for that, who is too impatient with his coaches and GM. So he gives these guys another year, but he's still impatient. It's better to either rip off the Band-Aid and start from scratch, or tell these guys, this isn't just 1 year. We're sticking with you for 3 years.
Yes.
The problem is your fan base isn't going to want to hear that.
No.
And the one way that this might make sense for the Giants is if when Mara said, I've just about run out of patience, he's pandering to the customers, but privately he's willing to stick with these guys and they know it. And it'll be proven out in what they do. If they trade up and get Cam Ward, that tends to suggest that these guys have been told it's not playoffs or pack your stuff and go. You're still going to have a spot here.
The difference between the Giants and the Jets is that the Jets know they're clowns. That's my take. You brought something up last night. We were talking offline that was interesting. Is the running back market really back, or is it back with an asterisk? And obviously with Saquon Barkley becoming the highest paid running back in the league. And I think there's I think we all, and I've said this many times, but everybody always learns the wrong lessons from the previous Super Bowl team. And I think there will be some teams where it's, well, we got to be sorted at running back, kind of like what you're describing here. For me, the running game has never gone away. People thinking that teams can pass 70 times a game, that's just not feasible if you're going to win. But the running back, the actual bell cow back, there's reasons that market is cratered. Saquon is different. Saquon is one of one, but then you have Ashton Ginty in this draft. You have Amarian Hampton in this draft. People say, okay, well, Saquon's success could push that up. Where are you right now on the running back market. I think it swung too far the other way. I think $10 million, $12 million for a guy you know is going to be a difference maker over 2 or 3 years is totally fine. There's a reason Howie Roseman did this. Where are you in the running back market?
Well, and this goes back for me more than 20 years. Before I landed with NBC, I had free time on Saturdays. I wasn't traveling back and forth to Connecticut, so I went to all of the West Virginia home games. And it dawned on me, 2002, 2003, thereabouts, every major college program has a running back who can play in the NFL. If you block for him, if he can hold on to the football when he's hit like he's never been hit before, and you don't know that until he gets to the NFL, and if you can trust him to pick up blitzers, you've got an NFL running back on possibly every major college team. So we saw teams begin to develop this interchangeable part approach. Really, it's Kyle Shanahan. It's Mike Shanahan.
Yeah.
Remember when he was in Denver, right? Terrell Davis gets injured. Oh, we plug in. Who was the guy?
Mike Anderson was in there.
There was one in between. Yeah, there were three of them in all.
Every single time. It was
Olandis Gary. Is it Olandis Gary? Olandis Gary. He has 1,000 yards. Then it's Mike Anderson has 1,000 yards. And it's the system that's conducive to the guys, capable guys, growing on trees at all the major colleges who can come in and play running back. And I think the cautionary tale came with the Sean Alexander contract. After the Seahawks made it to the Super Bowl against the Steelers, they gave Alexander more than they wanted to because they had to, because he's the most popular guy on the team. Everybody's got his jersey. You got to keep Sean Alexander. A year later, they were wishing they could get out of that contract. So we saw it swing away from, with exceptions like Adrian Peterson, it swung away from the idea that you have a guy who's a battering ram who gets better as the game goes on. And by the fourth quarter, the defenders are just falling on the ground because they don't want to get hit by the guy again. We went with this rotation approach, and what it does is it makes the price of the market go down, because I got 5 years out of this guy. Why am I going to pay him a big pile of money when I can just go draft a guy or not draft a guy? I can go find Arian Foster, undrafted, and he leads the league in rushing his second year. I think where we are now, and I think this is the right spot, there's two levels of running back. There's the great running back who does get paid, should get paid, will get paid, and he's better than, he stands head and shoulders above the guys that you can do the 2 and 3 back rotation with. And it's Saquon, it's Derrick Henry, it's Josh Jacobs. 3 teams learned that lesson the hard way last year. And I think that's one of the reasons why, it's one of the big reasons why during the season we saw the Panthers redo Chuba Hubbard and not let him get anywhere close to free agency. We even saw the Cardinals, who picked up James Conner when the Steelers decided we'll let him go and we'll go draft his replacement. The Cardinals re-signed James Conner during the season because there could be this copycat, but misguided copycat idea of let's go out and sign a free agent running back. I mean, Najee Harris could end up getting overpaid in the market because there could be, all it takes is one owner who thinks we just have to go get a running back. And let's go get this year's Saquon Barkley, and we can hold up his jersey, and we can have the press conference, and we can renew some season tickets. We've got the best running back in this year's class. But all due respect to Najee Harris, who's never missed a game and who has 4,000-yard seasons, he's not Saquon Barkley, he's not Derrick Henry, and he's not Josh Jacobs. If he were, he would have had another contract by now with the Steelers. Hell, they would have picked up his 5th-year option, which they didn't do. So to me, Kevin, that's the difference. Great running backs need to get paid a lot of money. The lesser ones are in that churn, and those are the ones who, when their rookie contracts expire, you say, see you later, we'll just go find somebody else in the draft, because they will. The history shows that it is an easily replaceable position, unless it's a great running back who's walked out the door.
Top of the top. It's funny, Najee Harris, I saw this the other day and I was blown away. He has the longest 1,000-yard streak in the NFL, obviously 4 years. And it's because he's healthy, because the last couple of years has gone right over that mark. But it's like, he was just born, if he was born 1970, like every GM would be like, oh my God, a tough, hard running bell cow back who gets 1,000 yards. Let's go. And the league is saying, like the Steelers. I mean, they're again, you mentioned it. The Steelers are not some incredibly analytic driven organization where they're like, no, we'll never pay a running back, they would pay him if the league thought that he was worth that. But that's a different topic for another day.
Well, but here's the thing too, and Troy Aikman's made this point: 1,000-yard season nowadays with 17 games, and each
Yes.
of Najee Harris's 4,000-yard seasons came with 17 games. Not nearly as impressive as 1,000 yards with 14 games. And I think that's part of this too. And it's just basic stuff like the burst isn't there. Jaylen Warren has always had a much better burst with the ball than Najee Harris. But there's something to be said for staying healthy, for running tough, and for just grinding it out and being reliable. And somebody's going to pay him more than they probably should because he's going to be the best running back in this year's class.
You keep a close eye on the Vikings, famously. What are they doing, Mike?
I don't know, and I don't think they know. And and seriously,
Yeah.
in advance of the franchise tag deadline, I started making some calls to figure out whether or not they were going to tag Sam Darnold, because Kevin O'Connell, the day after he won the Coach of the Year award for the 2024 season, he was on with us at PFT Live from the Super Bowl, and he said the same thing he said last year about Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
He said Sam Darnold has earned the right to become a free agent, which implies they're not going to use the franchise tag. So all of a sudden, there's this chatter. They might use the franchise tag. So, well, they're going to make Kevin O'Connell look like a liar if he's saying he's earned the right to become a free agent. So I started picking around, and I think for now, and I don't think this is strategic. This isn't Deion Sanders 4D chess. There's a sense by those dealing with the Vikings that they don't know who's calling the shots. They don't know who's making the decision. And the strategy isn't obvious as to what they want to do. Now, you could say they're just trying to keep people guessing, but at a certain point, you got to call the ball. You got to make a decision. And if they're waiting out this market to see whether or not teams will shy away from giving Sam Darnold a significant contract, because they'll look at it and say, this is all Kevin O'Connell and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and it's not about Darnold, and it's not going to be duplicated with our team. We're not going to make a major investment and have him revert to the guy who was seeing ghosts for the Jets when he was early in his career. If that's the case and the Vikings can get him for what they regard as a dollar for dollar good deal, then maybe they will. But Kevin, here's the consequence to that. If they commit to Darnold for 2 years, now they might think, oh, well, it worked with the Packers twice. Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 years. Jordan Love sat for 3 years. Let's give Sam Darnold 2 more years. Let's use the money we save on other positions. And then J.J. McCarthy takes over in what would be year 4 of his career. The miscalculation here is I firmly believe if they commit to Darnold for 2 years, McCarthy is going to go public and say, I want out. And if that happens, then they have a mess. And maybe they understand that, which maybe contributes to this idea of they really don't know what they want to do, because they understand you can't have door number 1 and door number 2. You got to pick one or the other in this moment. And if you pick door number 1 and stick with Sam Darnold, door number 2 may never be there. And obviously, if you pick door number 2, Darnold's not going to be there. You're going to have to find somebody else to be the Darnold, whether it's Daniel Jones or whether it's somebody else. And I think that is causing them to maybe let this play out, because maybe the problems get solved if somebody swoops in and offers Darnold more than what the Vikings have budgeted for him.
I'm fascinated by it. I don't. The problem is, quickly, J.J. McCarthy hasn't played a lot of football. Like, you look at how many throws Bo Nix had and Michael Penix and even Caleb Williams, a lot more throws at the college level, now the NFL level, than J.J. McCarthy got at the college level.
Jaden Daniels too. It's a great point.
Daniels. And the idea that now, like, this turned out to be incorrect. I don't think they should have signed Darnold last year, because I think J.J. McCarthy needed every single rep in camp. I think J.J. McCarthy needed to be the guy. Hey, we're going to give you first team reps. You're going to be starting in September. The only way forward is to say, hey, we're going to give you a lot of football. And Sam Darnold re-signing there would be a disaster for that particular plan. We could do this all day.
I agree with you completely. Let me just say one last thing. Let's not assume he'd even duplicate in Minnesota what he did last year, because last year there was no J.J. McCarthy hovering. He was out for the entire year. If McCarthy's on the sideline and Darnold had some games during the season that were like, oh my God, like against the Titans and the Jaguars, it wasn't pretty. You got an alternative ready to go. Darnold may get a little more skittish, hold the ball a little more tightly, be looking over his shoulder a little bit more. Last year, I think they need to accept last year was just a rare moment where the planets aligned, and it's not going to happen again.
One more before we talk about your novels. Is there a story right now? You're always very good at getting something on the radar that a lot of people are talking about, then it becomes a big deal? Is there anything right now where you're just like, I'm paying attention to this thing. I don't think the media is talking about it enough. Anything going on right now?
Well, I mean, the Shedeur Sanders thing is something that
Yeah.
crystallized for me yesterday. I've been thinking a lot about what's going to happen with Kirk Cousins in
Yeah.
Atlanta. And I think it's far
Totally
more
agree.
complicated than people realize, because this isn't like the Broncos and Russell Wilson last year. If he gets cut by the Falcons, he's not going to go somewhere and take the minimum. 27.5 is not much money. 39 for Russell Wilson, no one was going to come close to that. And I think the real challenge here, what will another team pay him if he's free? And if there's another team that will pay him more than 27.5 this year, that team should want to trade for him.
Yeah.
But he's got a no trade clause. And the Falcons' leverage is, hey, you'll get your 27.5 and you'll have $10 million next year that fully vests, but you're not playing. If you want to play, you need to waive your no trade clause. I just think that this game of chicken that's being played between Cousins and Atlanta is far more complicated than we realize. And they got to make a decision, because that $10 million for next year becomes fully vested just a few days into the new league year, which starts next Wednesday. And who knows what's going to happen. But it could be that if the Falcons cut him, it could be they save the 27.5. Because if he goes somewhere else and they do a 2-year deal and it's $35 million a year, Falcons are off the hook altogether.
I hadn't thought about that. It's still a disaster, by the way.
It is
if
a
this
disaster.
works out, Falcons fans, don't come at me and say it was a good idea. All right, so you've got a second act here as a novelist. You've been doing this for a few years. Explain, first of all, where people can get it. You said there were some deals on there, and also why you want to do this. I think anybody who writes for a living has always said, "Hey, what if I start just experimenting with different stuff?" And I think there's a lot of people who maybe sometimes when they're a journalist, it was their first love or their first path, and they got off the beaten path or whatever. Explain why you're doing this, where people can get it.
Well, what happened was, and really during the pandemic, after the draft that year, there was no off-season program.
I remember.
I had a lot more free time in May and June than I've ever had, at least since I've been covering the NFL. And, what I do every day at PFT, everything I write today, and we've been doing it for 24 years now, everything I write today, by tomorrow, it has zero value. Whatever limited value it has today, by tomorrow, you know what you got to do, Kevin? You got to wake up and you got to do it all over.
Do it all again.
And everything you write, no matter how insightful, entertaining, humorous, either intentionally or otherwise it might be, by the next day, it's meaningless. And it's just one day after another of the same thing. And we've been doing, I've written content for PFT every single day of my life since January 1 of 2004. It's the only New Year's resolution. Well, it's the first of two New Year's resolutions I've made and kept.
What's the other?
And so there's I think an appeal to the idea of writing something that has value for more than a day, and that maybe somebody trips over after I'm 6 feet in the ground and reads it and enjoys it, learns something. Maybe there's some positive message that was either intentionally or unintentionally crafted into it that helps them in their lives. I don't know, but it's a nice balance to every day, write more, and by tomorrow it doesn't matter. So that's how I got into it. And it's been 5 years now. And what it does for me, at the end of the day, I carve out a couple of hours, and my wife's very, very cooperative with this, because I end up working basically every minute that I'm awake. But it balances out what I do all day long. And it's just fun. It's just fun to create new worlds, new characters. I love writing dialogue. It's just fun. And it gets me ready to do it all over again the next day. And I've got the three that you can get for 99 cents in ebook form: Father of Mine, the sequel, Son of Mine, and On Our Way Home, which is kind of a Christmas but ghost story as well. I got 7 others that I'm trying to figure out the right move, the right place, the right thing to do. But that 99 cent for the ebook, that's my other New Year's resolution that I've kept, because unless you're J.K. Rowling or who's the guys at James Patterson, you aren't getting rich writing books. No. It just has to be a labor of love. I don't care about the money. And I know when people say that, they actually care about the money. I don't. And 99 cents for these books in ebook fashion should prove it. And I've said to people, if you spend the 99 cents and you truly don't like it, I'll mail you $1. Okay. It's about getting people to enjoy reading. We grew up, and I don't know how it was for you, but when I grew up, anytime you had to read a book, it was a pain in the ass. I don't want to read a book. I have to read a book for school and write a report about it. I don't want to do that. I hate reading. I don't want to read. So as an adult, you got to rediscover it. And I'm trying to give people a pathway to rediscovering it because it is a nice diversion, especially when it's not football season. It's a nice diversion to have a book on your phone that you can read a chapter here, a chapter there, right? Very short chapters. I'm trying to be sensitive to our short-term attention span reality.
Millennials. You're writing for millennials. Yeah.
But it's something you can carry around, and it's a nice little, hey, when I get a break, I go back into this world and it whisks me away, and what happens next in this story. And I've tried to craft that to give people something that they can use as a diversion, because there's a lot of crap going on now. Whoever you are, whatever you think, wherever you fit in the overall economic spectrum, we all have crap that we got to deal with. And this is a way to kind of get through the crap and just keep going.
It's beautiful. I've come to the realization the last couple of years, writing for whatever reason does not endure in the way I thought it did when I was younger. And part of that was because I was such a massive sports writing dork when I was a kid. So I would get like the best sports writing of the century, right? Or I'd get the best sports writing 2003 or whatever. And I'd read these pieces and I'd say, God, this is an amazing piece that captures a moment in time. And then as I started to get older, I would read like the old Esquire pieces or the old GQ pieces, GQ Sports or whatever. And I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, like these, first of all, like no one brings this stuff up anymore. But also like a lot of the bylines, like they just never went anywhere. Like you write these amazing pieces and then nothing would happen. And then I was writing these pieces where I was like, in the moment, we all think we're Hemingway, right? You're just like, oh my God, people are going to talk about this for a million years. And it's like, at most in our industry, at most, people will talk about your piece for a season. If you write an amazing, like, Mina wrote an amazing Aaron Rodgers profile about a decade ago, right? Like that was at the upper echelon of what people talk about, and it's about a year. And like for me, like I wrote a Dan Campbell piece that like I still think endures, but after about 8 months, no one brought it up to me again. And so it's like to have anything that can exist. Now, a lot of the times that's video now. A lot of times like people bring up videos from 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Sometimes that's to our detriment. We have takes.
Yeah, exactly. Like. Usually when we're wrong. They never bring them back when we were right.
Well, Florio nailed this one. It never happens. Yeah. It's always like, look what he said about that.
And anybody who brings back their own video when they were right, my reaction is, let's see all the ones when you were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it's a good point about writing something that endures, because I've thought about that a lot.
Hey, I don't need a year. I'll just take a month. Yeah. Right. I'm telling you, for me, it's a day. It's dance for me, clown. The next day, nobody cares about what I did yesterday. I could have had the best 25 blurbs I've ever written in my life, and nobody cares by the next day. They just want more.
I agree. Mike Florio, thanks for making your debut, buddy.
Thanks, pal. Thanks for having me.